Hi everyone, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur, and I hope that you're doing well. I'd like to share a few thoughts on Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, and boy did I enjoy this novel. It's a book that my wife read a couple of years ago, and she really liked it. She said, read it when you want something that's a different, pace in your reading. It's going to change it up. So I read it last month, and I really enjoyed this book. It cast a spell on me. There are elements of fantasy and sort of horror, supernatural horror within the book. There are elements of the campus novel and of dark academia, of course. But there are also these elements in which the book really reads like a thriller. It's a mystery that needs to be resolved. And so each of those elements, those strands, come together and coalesce into form a book that is much more than the sum of its parts. And I really enjoyed this book. So I would recommend it. If any of those strands interest you, I'd recommend reading this book. We are introduced to Alex Stern almost right away. And she is a member of the Ninth House, of Lethe House. She's a student at Yale University. And Lethe House works with the other secret societies. And there are actual secret societies: Skull and Bones, Scroll and Key, Manuscript, Book and Snake, Wolf's Head, all these different houses that exist in real life. And it turns out that what if there was some actual magic, some actual horror, some ghosts that really exist? And that was happening behind the scenes at Yale. And then there was a Ninth House, Lethe House, and their whole job was to just make sure that nothing goes too wrong, that no one actually gets hurt in a deadly way. Yes, these wealthy people and elites can manipulate events for their benefit, but no one should actually get hurt. And that's what we're led into. Of course, Alex Stern is an outsider. And so she brings in this element of being an outsider, but also giving us a window into the supernatural. She can see the ghosts that surround them, the spirits that surround them. And there's a real danger that she introduces from her narrative, from her perspective. And I think Bardugo does two things really, really well. One is she takes sort of those fantastical and horror elements that are so often written from a man's perspective, and she introduces the perspective from a woman, and specifically from a young woman. What would it be like to be a teenager and to suddenly feel like you're being followed by ghosts, that you see ghosts leering at you in a sense, and to reveal the horror that lies in life for someone from her perspective. And she does that really, really well. The other piece is she puts in these twists. She layers in twists, and she layers in the revelations. We don't find out this massive exposition about all the houses right away. Rather, we're introduced to one house at a time and little elements of them. What are the different quirks? Which one is more powerful? What are the different rituals that they're involved in? One can sort of predict this element of the future. Another can push fame. And so a famous writer might choose to summon the power from that house. Another, allows someone to take on the attributes of an animal or become an animal and shape change. And so each of those, has this different element that Bardugo is gradually introducing us to, but she's also unraveling sort of two inner and outer threads. There's the outer narrative around Alex Stern and what her experiences are like, and we know something's wrong. But we also have this inner narrative of, okay, what was going on before something went wrong? And we see those two sides working together ultimately to reveal a series of twists. But they're earned twists. That's not just gotcha. It's rather, these are elements that have been layered into the narrative really well. So I wanted to just read a sample. The room was a windowless chamber, sandwiched between the lecture hall and the classroom that grad students used for discussion sections. It was a forgotten remnant of the old medical school, which had held its classes here in SSS before it moved to its own buildings. The managers of the trust that funded Skull and Bones had sealed up the room's entrance and disguised it with new paneling sometime around 1932. All facts Alex had gleaned from Lethe, a legacy, when she probably should have been reading Nostromo. No one spared Alex a glance. All eyes were on the Haruspex, his lean face hidden behind a surgical mask, pale blue robes spattered with blood. His latex-gloved hands moved methodically through the bowels of the patient subject sacrifice? Alex wasn't sure which term applied to the man on the table. Not sacrifice. He's supposed to live. Ensuring that was part of her job. She'd see him safely through this ordeal and back to the hospital ward he'd been taken from. But what about a year from now, she wondered, 5 years from now? Alex glanced at the man on the table, Michael Reyes. She'd read his file 2 weeks ago when he was selected for the ritual. The flaps of his stomach were pinned back with steel clamps, and his abdomen looked like it was blooming, a plump pink orchid, plush and red at its center. Tell me that doesn't leave a mark. But she had her own future to worry about. Reyes would manage. Alex averted her eyes, tried to breathe through her nose as her stomach roiled, coppery saliva flooded her mouth. She'd seen plenty of bad injuries, but always on the dead. And she moves on to see that, learn that we're told that the ritual is in Dutch, a language used at one point in New York when it was New Amsterdam. And there are all of these little details that get pushed through and that really do work within the narrative. As I said, there's an element to the writing where we're always given just enough from this point of view that Alex has. We also are introduced to another character, Daniel Arlington or Darlington, and we get to find out who he was. He was supposed to be her mentor, and we know something's happened. He's disappeared for a little while. And the way that Alex at one point has to go through this Aeneas-like ritual where she goes into the limbo to look for someone who's missing. And that there are like souls down there and these spirits down there that want to tug on her. And it really is a horrifying moment within the narrative. And there's a tactile sense to the horror in the book where we really get a sense of what it feels like. What is Alex feeling? What does it smell like? How does it feel on her skin or in her throat or in her nostrils? All of those elements come through. And Bardugo is very good at those aspects of the writing. But we also have these little periodic introductions to the different houses. Wolf's Head, fourth of the Houses of the Vale. Though Berzelius would argue the point, members practiced therianthropy and consider simple shape-shifting to be base magic. They focus instead on the ability to retain human consciousness and characteristics while in animal form. Primarily used for intelligence gathering, corporate espionage, and political sabotage, Wolf's Head was a major recruitment ground for the CIA in the 1950s and 60s. It can take days for someone to shake off the traits of an animal after a shifting ritual. Keep discussions of an important or sensitive nature around animals to a minimum. And we're told that's from The Life of Lethe, Procedures and Protocols of the Ninth House. After that, we get a primary source. I'm tired and my heart won't stop racing. My eyes look pink, not the whites, the irises. When Roger said we were going to like rabbits, I didn't think he meant actual rabbits. Lethe Day's Diary of Charles Chase McMahon, Saybrook College, 88. And so those periodic introductions about, okay, here's a new house, we're going to get to know them right away. Quick little anecdote that's going to give us a sense of who are the students in this house. But as we find out, there are actual murders occurring. Darlington has disappeared, and what is Alex going to do to sort of get the guy back who can actually do the magic? She can see the ghost, but she doesn't feel comfortable doing this magic. And who's behind these murders? Is it one of the houses? Is it a set of students? Is it someone who benefited from the house at one point? All of those questions are answered in this book, and not necessarily in the way you'd expect. As I said, there are layers to the mysteries and the twists, but they are earned, and I really did enjoy this. Now, I know there are some folks who felt like, oh, you know, Bardugo has written a lot of young adult books, and the writing in this is too close to that. I didn't sense that. I didn't get the sense that this was a young adult novel masquerading as a new adult novel. I just really did enjoy it. So let me know if you've read this, what you thought. Certainly I'm looking forward to reading Hellbent, the sequel. My wife had picked this up, so I'll be reading this at some point, perhaps on our trip. I was, of course, reminded of The Secret History by Donna Tartt. There are elements of the horror that feel close to some of the elements that Lovecraft and the other writers in the Cthulhu mythos and sort of that cosmic horror mythos delve into. The horror is much more fantastical in Ninth House. It's not so much cosmic horror, but the way in which bodies are described and there's this sense of dread that just runs through so many pages is very much present. Another work I was reminded of is another book I don't see too many folks mention, and that would be The Glass Books of the Dreameaters by G.W. Dahlquist. I liked this book a lot too. I know this was regarded as overwritten or overwrought in some ways, but the different narratives and points of view in this I think worked really well, and the elements of steampunk and you know, horror and historical fantasy I thought worked really well. As I had mentioned, Alex, and you find this out very quickly, can see ghosts. And there are elements of Stephen King's The Shining that I found. It's not the same as sort of the father-son relationship that's so important in The Shining, but the way that ghosts are actually scary, that they sort of ruin your life. The horror ruins a person's life and just dominates their consciousness. That's what's going on in Ninth House. And then finally, when I think of you know, school and horror and mystery, and particularly from a main character who's a woman, I would think of Suspiria, of course, by Dario Argento. So let me know if you've read any of Leigh Bardugo's books. Let me know what you thought of Ninth House. Let me know which house you wish you could be in. And I hope everybody's doing well. Thank you.